Thank you so much, colleagues.
Yeah.
Thank you, Julia. And I concur with the panelists that just talked now. I need to address the issue of that Janelle just raised about us living in a post-colonial setting. I think she's right to an extent because Africa did experience political colonization. That is a fact. However, we are now experiencing yet another wave of decolonization, or we are clamoring for another wave of decolonization that talks to the decolonization of space, economy, being, nature, and all these other things that were not actually addressed in the first wave of decolonization. So that's one end. And with regard to the question posed about the post-colonial that we're hoping for, it forms what Gajeni would term the utopic grammars of that we do have within the said planning kind of fraternity, where we're actually hoping and dreaming, if you will, and imagining a better future where we as human beings love and care for one another, where we put forward the ethics of care, irrespective of one's color of skin, one's sexuality, one's religion, and so on. So it is a utopic register that is worth fighting for. So in as much as we acknowledge what happened in the past, we need to move forward and try and think about ways of making sure that never again will the color of a man's skin or woman's skin determine his or her position in the world. We know what racism does. We know what it did and continues to do in some parts of the world. We know what sexism and patriarchy does to people. And so we need to move forward and think about other registers, utopic registers, to use Sabelon Zavukajeni's term, and other decolonial grammars, if I was to employ Mignolo here in this discussion, where we can actually envision the better present and the better future for ourselves, but also for other than humans. So now decoloniality is not so much about the human, it is about the post-Anthropocene world, where the human ceases to be at the center of the world. Because for centuries, the human were living under this mirage and myth that they are, and we are at the center of the world. And we are not. We are actually a part of the world. There's the natural world, plants, trees, and everything else. The world, the aqua world, as well as the stratosphere, whatever you call it. And we are a part of that particular world. And we cannot continue to plunder the earth and hope for the earth to heal itself. Right? We cannot continue to self-aggrandize and brutalize the environment and others and ourselves in the process with the intention of trying to basically satisfy our wanton needs and desires. So that's one thing I just needed to address. And finally, as we're talking, I'm actually compelled to believe that in as much as we're operating in a planning space, we are not planners. Or are we planners? Because if you look at the world and how the world is structured from a cartographic perspective, to see that the world order has been structured in such a manner that Africa will continue and the global south, and again, that is a very contentious level because it assumes a hierarchy, that there's a north that is up there and then the south that is down there. But anyway, we'll talk about that maybe some other time. But what I need to address is that we need to really question ourselves as to, are we really planners? If so, what are we planning? Because in some instances, what I've seen in municipalities are managers of capital, and what I've seen in universities and what students are taught basically are how to manage land use, the land that most of them do not even own, or if they do own it, the regime of land ownership is so Eurocentric to the point that it reproduces one inequality right? Whether at a racial and now at a class kind of level, leaving the rest of the people outside, as it were. So looking at it from such, we can also talk about the idea of law, right, and lawlessness, for instance. Law and planning have been working hand in glove, actually, in the creation of geographies of inequality. We know that, we've seen that. It continues to play itself out across the entire world. There was now, as a result of law and planning, as well as claims to land that we do not even own. There's no way that a person can own land that we find here on this earth. There's no way that a person can own a river and trees and animals and mountains. And yet, through some laws and through some ordinances and through planning and zoning for such, right, some people have decided that they own a piece of the earth, and ultimately they own the earth itself, and others do not. And that creates a lot of friction on an ongoing basis. So planners then find themselves as nothing but managers of coloniality in the interest of those that really, really own the earth. And those that really own the earth, to use actually them as a word, are those that manage and champion and man capital, right? And those that maintain the status quo and not want to talk about issues related to equity, equality, human rights, right? Because for a very long time, there's some people that have been not objects of human rights. You know? So if you found yourself to be black, you are an object of human rights. You experience human rights and development through its lack, as opposed to interacting and engaging with it as others would. So these are some of the issues I think that we need to talk about. And finally, coloniality, which is a colonial condition. The conditions that were put in place by colonialism and apartheid is not over, but it is all over. It is in the curriculum in universities. It is in the books that we read about planning. It is in the people that are supposedly writing and publishing on planning, and those whose voices are actually muted because they happen to be on the so-called wrong side of the track, right? It is in the publishing of planning knowledge. It is in the rubbishing of everything else that comes from the global south, and so on and so forth. It is again in the power relations between those that review what is written and those that determine what gets to be published and what does not get to be published, and so on and so forth. Now that talks to the coloniality of knowledge itself. It's production, dissemination, it's publication. So those are some of the things that we find ourselves actually grappling with the global south. And unfortunately, the global south does not exist in isolation. If the global south continues to suffer under the weight of coloniality, global north will also suffer because we live in one world, a world where there is no outside, to use one of